At 5:17 on September 25th, 6 Ukrainian Beaver drones took off from Kherson, heading for Ketcha airfield in Crimea, where 2 AN-26s were parked, waiting to be the next targets. As 6 Ukrainian Beaver drones slipped off the Kherson shoreline and vanished into the darkness toward Crimea, no one could have predicted that only minutes later, the entire operation would unravel into a cascading chain of events, each link breaking open a new layer of drama. This was no longer a simple strike mission. It was an anatomical map showing, in brutal clarity, how a massive air defense system can be deceived, bent, and finally pierced at the very points where it believes itself strongest. The core of the story isn't luck. It's the collision between outdated Russian technology, rigid doctrine, and sluggish tactical reflexes, all confronted by the audacity, adaptability, and precision engineering of Ukrainian UAVs. Out of this collision came a spreading collapse, like cracks racing across a sheet of ice. The first seconds ignited the chain reaction. A Russian Tor-M2 system, accidentally positioned right on the drone's hidden route, locked onto them from 12 kilometers away and launched a missile fast enough to tear apart a fighter jet mid-air. It should have been a swift execution of the mission. Yet a desperate dive by the lead Beaver, dropping until it skimmed just 3 meters above the Black Sea, saved it from destruction and inadvertently triggered chaos deeper down the Russian defensive layers. From misguided missiles to confused radar signatures, from a patrol boat outmaneuvered to a helicopter forced into retreat by its own side's air defenses, every tier of the Russian system reacted late, wrong, or both, like a giant machine whose gears were snapping under stress. What's alarming is how every attempt to seal one fracture caused 2 more to open. Legacy radars struggled to distinguish a decoy from a real threat. Naval guns couldn't elevate high enough to aim. An attack helicopter was boxed in by the ever-present risk of friendly fire. And the Panzer batteries, the final shield, were oriented in the wrong direction at the exact moment they were needed most. None of these failures were random. They were the predictable outcome of a system built on tactical assumptions instead of real-time adaptation, on habit rather than learning. A system convinced it controlled the airspace, unaware that the enemy had been dictating the tempo from dozens of kilometers away. When both AN-26 aircraft erupted into towering fireballs at 0601, the event had already grown beyond a single battle. It had become a chilling warning about the future of modern warfare, where inexpensive gasoline-powered toy planes can carve through billion-dollar air defense networks, and where hesitation measured in seconds can trigger irreversible chain reactions. And within that collapse lies the true message of this story. Victory no longer belongs to the strongest force, but to the fastest learner.
At 0517 hours, on September 25th, an engagement began over the Black Sea that really should fundamentally change how we all view air defense strategy. We're talking about the attack on Ketcha airfield in Crimea. 6 low-cost Ukrainian-designed Beaver drones set off toward 2 Antonov AN-26 transport aircraft just sitting on the tarmac.
Right.
Now, this isn't just a story about a destroyed aircraft. This is a deep dive into a systemic failure. The question we're tackling is this. How did 4 of these slow composite frame drones, I mean, they're essentially flying bombs, how did they get through 4 distinct layers of integrated multi-million-dollar Russian air defense?
And that's the core of it. We have to look at the mindset behind this failure. This was not bad luck. The hardware involved, a lot of its design philosophy goes all the way back to the Soviet era. It was engineered to handle basically 2 kinds of threats: high-altitude fighter jets and very expensive high-speed cruise missiles.
Predictable threats.
Exactly. Predictable. They were built on assumptions of scale. And what these Beaver drones did was turn all that sophistication into a liability. They're adaptive, they're low cost, and they are pre-programmed to exploit every single weakness RANs. Minimum ranges, slow turning, outdated logic. It's power analysis in action.
Agility versus expense.
Precisely.
Okay, let's trace the path of these drones, starting with that first trap.
Yeah.
The operators tried to use a known radar gap, but the Russians, well, they were a step ahead on that one. They moved a Tor-M2 system directly into the path.
And this is a very capable all-weather missile system. It locked onto all 6 drones at a range of 12 kilometers. The threat was immediate.
So what happened? It fires its primary weapon, the 9M331 missile.
It does. Now, this missile is a speedster. It's a 1990s design built to intercept jets flying high and fast. It hits Mach 3 very, very quickly.
You can't outrun that.
You can't. So the drone operator did the one thing the missile just couldn't handle. They didn't try to outrun it. They tried to outturn it low.
The drone just dives for the deck. We're talking, what, 3 meters above the Black Sea, just skimming the salt spray.
Exactly. And the physics of that moment are just brutal for the missile. To follow that sharp dive, it had to pull incredible G-forces.
Too many.
Way too many. The friction, the heat from the air passing over its control surfaces at that speed, combined with the stress, they literally started to warp, maybe even melt. It failed structurally before it failed electronically, just crashed right into the water.
And that one failure opened the door for what came next. The second drone was damaged in the explosion and had to abort, but the other 5 scatter. But one of them does something very strange. It turns back toward Ukraine and starts climbing. Why would it fly back into danger?
That was the genius of the plan. It was a deliberate decoy. It was designed to fool the Tor M2's computer.
How so?
By climbing, it presented its full wingspan, maximizing its radar cross-section. It went from a tiny dot to a much bigger, higher priority target. And critically, that vertical movement created a strong Doppler shift.
And the old Soviet programming kicks in.
It's rigid. It assumes a big climbing radar return has to be a high-value threat. A fighter jet, an incoming missile, something important.
So 2 more very expensive Tor missiles are wasted chasing a decoy.
That's it. And that little pause, that moment of computational confusion was everything. The 4 real threats dropped back down to wave height and slipped right inside the system's minimum engagement range.
And that's the zone where the missile's safety systems won't let the warhead arm in time. You described it perfectly before as trying to punch somebody who's hugging you.
It's the perfect analogy, a $10 million system, completely neutralized by simple geometry and a software loophole. A warning goes out to the Black Sea Fleet at 0528 hours. 4 ultra-low flyers heading for the coast.
Which brings us to Layer 2, the Raptor patrol boat. And to be fair, Russian naval intelligence was spot on here. They knew Ukrainian drones tend to cross between 0530 and 0600.
Right when the watch changes. The old crew was thinking about breakfast, not about the horizon.
And the Raptor was waiting, hiding behind the Duralsk gas platform.
And they weren't using radar, they were using thermals. This is another key detail. The drone's little gasoline engine runs hot, maybe 200 degrees Celsius. The Black Sea at that hour is maybe 15 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, they'd stand out.
They glow like cigarettes in a dark room. The Raptor spotted them from 8 kilometers away.
Ambush is on. The Raptor's remote weapon station, the upper Accord, opens up with a 14.5 millimeter heavy machine gun. These rounds can punch through an inch of steel. The Lid Beaver takes 6 direct hits.
But this is where the drone's cheap composite design becomes an advantage. It's not built like a metal plane, it's an empty box. The important bits, electronics, explosives, they're tucked away. Those huge rounds just pass straight through the fuselage without hitting anything critical. The drone was full of holes, but it kept flying because it was structurally, empty.
So they had them dead to rights. They had the firepower, but they were defeated by a simple change in altitude.
That's exactly right. The drone operator, after taking those hits, instinctively pulls up to 100 meters. That puts the drone directly over the boat at about an 85-degree angle.
And the gun can't aim that high.
The up of Accord's maximum elevation is 60 degrees. The drone was in its blind spot. It's like trying to swat a fly on the ceiling when you can only aim horizontally.
So the captain tries to use speed. The Raptor goes from 0 to 48 knots in 12 seconds. It's fast.
Very fast. But at that speed, physics takes over. The boat's turning radius stretches out to 300 meters. The drones had already split left and right. They were too close, too slow. The captain was just fundamentally outmaneuvered. He had to abort.
Okay, so the naval defense fails. That forces an immediate scramble for Layer 3, aerial pursuit. A Kamov Ka-52 helicopter gets the call. This is a serious piece of hardware.
Oh, yeah. Its coaxial rotors make it incredibly agile. But the pilot was already low on fuel. He had 40 minutes of engagement time, tops.
So he goes for his best weapon first, the Vickers anti-tank missile. This thing is designed to, as you put it, turn tanks into modern art.
It is. It flies at Mach 2, guided by a laser. But again, it's a high-end weapon for a low-end target.
And the problem is the fuse.
It's the radar cross-section. The Vickers proximity fuse is designed to detect the massive radar reflection of a tank. Think of a giant metal billboard. The Beaver drone, made of composite material, reflects radar like a business card.
So the missile flies right by it.
It passed within 3 meters. But it was just too high-tech to realize it had flown past its target. The warhead never detonated.
Missile fails. The pilot tries electronic warfare, tries to jam the control signals.
And this is where you see the simple brilliance of the drone's design. The moment they lost contact with their operators, they just switched to their stored, pre-programmed waypoints.
Point A to point B.
Simple as that. Jamming was completely useless. It was like shouting static at someone who's already hung up the phone. The drone was on its own.
So the pilot has one last option.
Right.
The 30mm cannon. He rolls into a hard dive to line up the shot.
And this might be the most profound failure of them all. That cannon is bore-sighted, or zeroed, for a specific range, in this case 500 meters. This is to compensate for bullet drop.
Okay.
But the pilot was diving hard, shooting at extremely close range, way inside that 500 meters. The aiming computer tried to correct for bullet drop that hadn't happened yet.
So it aimed low.
It aimed way low. The rounds just passed spectacularly underneath the target, splashing into the water. The drone was untouched. It's a design flaw that assumes standard combat, not a desperate, close-range dogfight with a slow drone.
And the pilot has to pull out.
At 0545, he had to. He was only 10 kilometers from the coast, entering the engagement range of the ground-based Panzer systems.
And with the known risk of friendly fire in that area, he couldn't risk getting shot down by his own side. So he retreats.
Leaving 4 battered, but still flying, Beavers to cross into Crimean airspace.
Which brings us to the final layer. The ground defenses at Kacha Airfield. 2 powerful radars, an MR-10M1 coastal system, and a mobile podlet K-1 feeding data to the Panzer batteries.
And here is the fatal irony that sealed the deal. After a previous attack just 4 days earlier, the Russian command made a decision. They repositioned all their Panzer systems to face north.
And the drones were coming from the south.
Exactly. To turn those massive defense systems 180 degrees takes about 30 seconds. In this kind of fight, that's an eternity. That delay was the final opening they needed.
So the lead Beaver just climbs right toward the MR-10M1 radar. It doesn't even need GPS at this point.
No, it just followed that powerful 200 kilowatt signal like breadcrumbs leading home. It flew inside the minimum range. A Panzer did fire 157 E6 missile, but it was too close.
And the missile self-destructs.
Harmlessly overhead, adding another $90,000 to the cost of the failure.
Meanwhile, the second drone is using the terrain to hide itself.
Right. It's causing massive signal interference. Radar waves are bouncing everywhere, creating ghost images on the Podlet K1 screen. The operator had to manually figure out which dot was real, and that gave the drone the last few seconds it needed.
And between 0600 and 0601, the mission is complete.
Textbook precision. The first 2 Beavers hit the MR-10M1 and the Podlet K1 antennas. They used a shape charge-a-jet of molten copper moving 8 times faster than a rifle bullet that just shredded the system's eyes.
And with the guidance systems blind, the last 2 drones line up on the runway.
The third one hits the first Antonov AN-26, tail number Blue 30. The fourth hits the second AN-26. The fireballs reach 40 meters high, burning hot enough to melt the aluminum airframes into puddles you could see on satellite images the next day.
What's incredible here is that this wasn't about overwhelming firepower. It was about systematically exploiting every single defensive weakness. They used geometry, patience, and programming to turn the enemy's strength, its power, its speed, its cost into a liability.
This whole engagement is a case study for the entire defense sector. It shows just how vulnerable these incredibly complex, high-cost systems are when they're built on outdated assumptions. They assume the target will fly straight, high, and be expensive.
But when faced with cheap, agile systems designed to exploit those exact limitations, the whole thing just cascades into failure.
It exposes a fundamental flaw in military doctrine.
And you have to wonder, what does it say about future conflicts when the prize, despite all these layers of defense, always seems to slip through at the last second, just like those arcade claw machines? The real cost isn't the planes or the wasted missile. The true implication from this deep dive is the strategic one. It's the necessity of spending billions to develop entirely new defense doctrines, just to counter an empty composite box flown by GPS waypoints. And you have to consider how quickly your most valuable strategic assumptions can become your most glaring tactical liabilities. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are immersing ourselves in one of the most brutal and, I think, strategically complex conflicts unfolding right now.
Absolutely.
We're focusing intensely on the Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, and we're looking at a conflict that, I mean, it just perfectly shows you the terrifying gap between what's happening on the battlefield and, well, the diplomatic theater.
That's the core of it, really.
We have a pretty robust stack of sources here. They detail its critical strategic value, Truly staggering casualty estimates, which, believe me, we will break down. And the high-stakes diplomatic games being played over every inch of ground. Okay, let's unpack this.
And that separation between the official claim and the reality on the ground, that's our mission today. We're here to distill the truth behind these dramatic headlines coming out of Moscow.
Right.
We really need to analyze why this battle is being fought so fiercely, what terrible price is being paid in human lives, and how those costs are, immediately being spun into political capital.
A deep dive into what some people call cognitive warfare, isn't it?
Exactly. It's about understanding how battlefield claims, whether they're true or completely false, are instantly used as leverage in international negotiations happening miles and miles away from the trenches.
So let's start with the prize itself. Why Pokrovsk? Why does it matter so much?
Well, before the full-scale invasion, it was a city of about 60,000 people, mostly known for its coal industry in the eastern Donetsk region. Pretty straightforward.
But its function completely shifted.
It shifted entirely because of its location. As the war got really focused on the Donbass, Pokrovsk transformed into this crucial logistical hub for Ukraine. It became a linchpin.
And if Russia can seize it, the strategic implications are massive.
Oh, huge. Russia's long-term goal for that whole region, it kind of hinges on this one city.
It's a springboard, right? A potential strategic springboard that opens up paths for assaults on those heavily fortified cities, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk.
That's the one. And if you just look at the sheer commitment Russia has made, it tells you everything you need to know about how important it is to President Vladimir Putin.
The commitment is. Oh, wait, it's staggering.
It really is. If you think back to that failed summer offensive Russia launched in 2025, the reports suggested they dedicated around 100,000 soldiers just to the Pokrovsk direction.
100,000, just for one objective. That was a huge portion of their available fighting force at the time.
And those numbers haven't gone down. They've actually escalated.
Yeah, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has recently claimed Russia has concentrated, an estimated 170,000 soldiers in that one direction.
170,000.
I mean, to put that in perspective for you, that's a small army. It's bigger than the entire defense forces of many countries, all aimed at one single localized objective.
In that scale, it tells us the tactic at play here. It's about overwhelming the defenders through sheer numbers, just a massive, relentless human wave.
The idea is to shatter Ukrainian defenses through attrition, right? The sheer volume of attacks will just eventually exhaust them.
That's the hope. But, and this is a critical point, as of our analysis today, it hasn't actually secured the city yet. The battle is still raging.
It hasn't worked yet. But the narrative from Moscow, well, that's a very different story.
Oh, completely. The story from Moscow is that the job is already done. And this is where the deliberate timing of their announcements is so important.
You're talking about December 2nd.
Exactly. On December 2nd, the Kremlin made this bold claim that Pokrovsk had fallen. This wasn't some random battlefield update. This was calculated.
The timing was, let's be honest, impeccable.
Yeah.
It came right on the eve of a key diplomatic meeting with United States envoys, specifically Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
He was clearly aiming to walk into that meeting from a position of strength.
And the presentation was just so theatrical. Putin, decked out in camouflage, trying to project this image of every inch the military man overseeing a huge victory.
He framed the supposed capture as securing, and I'm quoting here, a good foothold for accomplishing all the objectives set at the start of the invasion. He needed a win, real or not, at that exact moment.
And to back that claim up, Russia's defense ministry almost immediately released footage. It was shared widely, even by the Associated Press.
Right, the video of Russian troops waving their flag in what they said was the center of Pokrovsk.
And that was instantly broadcast all over Russian state television. The goal was to cement this idea of victory, not just for the Russian public, but for Western observers.
But as we've seen so many times in this conflict, the cinematic evidence didn't quite match the reality on the ground.
Not at all. Ukraine immediately disputed the claim. They didn't even deny that the video was filmed, but they were unequivocal about what happened next.
They said the soldiers who planted that flag were pushed back almost immediately after they filmed it. The area wasn't secure, not even close.
And the language from Ukraine's military Eastern Command was very clear. They said, and I quote, "Search and assault operations and the elimination of the enemy in urban areas continue in Pokrovsk."
Which is the technical military way of saying the Russians do not have control and, the fighting is still happening house to house.
And this wasn't just a one-off, was it? This wasn't an isolated bit of propaganda.
Not at all. The Kremlin simultaneously ramped up claims all across the Eastern Front. They claimed Vovchansk had fallen, that their forces were on the verge of taking Kupiansk. It was a coordinated effort to project this image of overwhelming momentum.
That Kupiansk claim was particularly audacious. The chief of Russia's general staff, Valery Gerasimov, he claimed the whole city had been liberated.
Which Ukrainian sources just immediately branded an outright fabrication. They confirmed the vast majority of Kupiansk was still firmly in Ukraine's hands.
The head of Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, Andriy Kovalenko, said it was all explicitly designed to raise the stakes in diplomacy.
And Ukraine's general staff put it perfectly on Telegram. They said the flag-waving video was, and I quote again, merely yet another attempt by the Kremlin to use a staged flag-planting video for propaganda purposes in order to influence participants in international negotiations.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This raises an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What does this pattern of coordinated, timed, and, well, premature claims tell us about the nature of this information war?
It tells us the battlefield has become a stage.
Exactly. Every move, every flag planted is calibrated to serve a political master far, far away from the actual fighting. The information war isn't just a side effect of the physical war. It is absolutely central to the entire strategy.
Which brings us to the actual cost of this strategy, the meat grinder aspect that has become so synonymous with these battles in the Donbass. Even if Pokrovsk does eventually fall, the staggering human price Russia is paying is something Ukraine frames as a victory in itself.
The Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, they've documented significant casualties, but the specific figures we're seeing, they are just horrific.
They are.
President Zelensky claimed that in October alone, at least 25,000 Russian soldiers were lost in the Pokrovsk direction. And crucially, he insisted every single loss was confirmed by first-person view drones, or FPV drones.
25,000 in a single month. And if you look at the broader timeline of this siege, the figures just climb higher and higher.
Yeah, people like Yuri Fedorenko, the commander of Ukraine's 429th Separate Achilles Battalion, and military analysts like David Axe, they estimate total Russian losses in the area have now exceeded 100,000 casualties since the start of 2025.
100,000 casualties.
Concentrated around a single city. It's a military and a moral catastrophe. It is a terrifying figure to even contemplate in human terms. It suggests an almost total disregard for the lives of their own soldiers.
And the tactics, they reflect that total disregard. There's a specific detail from a Euromaidan press report that, well, it really highlights the horror of it.
I think I know the one you mean.
Claims from Ukraine's 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade. They noted that in certain areas, the density of the Russian dead was so extreme that you could find up to 20 bodies in an area as small as 10 square meters.
20 men. In an area barely larger than a small car? Yeah. Think about that image for a second. That concentration of death. It speaks volumes.
It does. It suggests one of two horrifying things. Either they are attacking in these incredibly dense clusters, or they are using what are truly meat grinder tactics.
Where new groups are just ordered to follow the ones before them straight into the same death traps, literally climbing over the bodies of their comrades.
That level of sacrifice is meant to overwhelm the defense, but it comes at a punishing ratio. Now, Ukraine is guarded about its own losses, but the Russian Telegram channel SHIT claims Ukraine has lost around 6,500 soldiers.
Okay, so let's take that number and let's contrast it with the conservative estimate of 100,000 Russian casualties. The ratio is just, it's damning.
It is.
Russia has lost at least 15 soldiers for every single Ukrainian loss, a 15-to-1 casualty rate. It confirms exactly how severely Putin is bleeding troops for this single symbolic objective.
This isn't just attrition, it's self-destructive, and it's all aimed at buying time and leverage. Which brings us right back to the diplomatic angle.
That strategic leverage is the key, isn't it? This immense human cost is designed to be immediately converted into diplomatic advantage.
Without a doubt, the claims of victory were very transparently geared exclusively for Western audiences.
Ivan Stupak, he's a former officer in the Ukrainian Security Service, the SBU. He really emphasized this point. He said the whole staged declaration was purely about creating an image that Putin is in control.
Right, that he has the situation firmly in hand to send a message to the American side that everything is going well for Russia.
The intention seems crystal clear: to convince the visiting U.S. delegation that a Russian victory is inevitable, no matter the cost.
And the desired outcome from that is for the United States to then pressure Kyiv to enter negotiations and make huge concessions, potentially ceding much of the Donbass just to avoid more slaughter.
And the Russian media immediately started echoing this exact line. The Moscow-based Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper said the supposed advances are a hint that more and more Ukrainian territories are under our control, and next time Russia's conditions may be tougher.
It's an explicit threat, delivered through military propaganda.
And even the small symbolic choices were calculated. CNN noted that the choice of camouflage, the whole setup of the announcement, it was all a choreographed routine.
Designed specifically to project military strength and resolve to those U.S. envoys. It was psychological warfare aimed squarely at influencing what Witkoff and Kushner would report back to Washington.
And Putin wasn't done there either. He also tried to drive a wedge between the U.S. and its European allies.
Yes, he claimed European partners were purposefully sabotaging America's efforts to bring peace to Ukraine. He said, they don't have a peace agenda, they're on the side of the war.
It's a classic move, isn't it?
Yeah.
Manufacture a victory, threaten tougher terms, and then try to divide your opposition.
So what does this all mean? It means that every piece of information, every claimed advance, every liberation, whether it's true or false, is a strategic communication.
It's a message directed not at the opposing army, but right at the negotiation tables.
Trying to transform staggering human loss, 100,000 casualties, into a favorable diplomatic outcome.
The core insight of this deep dive, really, is understanding this dual reality. The actual battle for Pokrovsk is about Ukraine inflicting a crippling, unsustainable cost on Russia.
While at the same time, Putin is trying to turn battlefield lies and that immense expenditure of blood into immediate diplomatic leverage.
The city has not fallen yet. And the strategic goal for Ukraine, it seems, remains to extend this endgame to inflict maximum casualties on an already exhausted Russian assault force.
To ensure that the price for capturing the city far, far exceeds any potential reward.
Those 100,000 plus soldiers ordered to their deaths. They had to buy something in Moscow's eyes. Will the massive, horrific price paid on the ground ultimately translate into a favorable diplomatic outcome for Putin?
And that's the real question. The success of this immense propaganda push and its catastrophic losses will be judged not by troop movements on a map, but entirely by the reports the U.S. envoys deliver back to Washington and the policy decisions that follow.
That is the true prize they are fighting for.